Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another list video for all of you. We're going to be looking at 5 must-read street-level Marvel Comics characters. I'm really excited to showcase these characters. To do so, I've picked out a couple omnibuses and an epic collection. I'm a big Marvel fanboy, so I've been thinking about this video for a while. Before we jump in though, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's the best way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. When I think of street-level Marvel characters, I don't get too far without thinking about Marvel's line-crossing vigilante, the Punisher. To showcase the character, I'm going to be flipping through the Punisher Epic Collection, Circle of Blood. This was a really fun collection, comprised of a lot of his early titled solo adventures. Really a fun book here. I did review it on the channel not too long ago. For those that don't know much about Punisher, he was basically a military veteran who, in his civilian life, had his wife and children murdered in front of him on a family picnic by gangsters, and he basically swore vengeance upon criminals. He's not afraid to use lethal force, and arguably he crosses the line quite a bit. To call him a hero might be a bit of a stretch, but he's definitely a chaotic and interesting character. I've read a little bit of him as he's crossed over in other books, some of his solo stuff, and I gotta say, you get a lot of variety with Punisher. Some collections like this are fairly tame. Yes, we have some violence and things like that, but it's not as extreme as what I understand like the Punisher Max line is. That's more of an adult comic book, but you get everything in between. This character, like I said, shows up in a bunch of crossovers. I have a couple where he battles Daredevil or teams up with Daredevil. Really enjoy seeing that. They've made a couple movies for Punisher, and he's had his own TV series. Really a fun character overall. I understand he's not everyone's cup of tea, but a great street-level character. You don't often see him battling supervillains, although it does happen on occasion. No, he mostly goes after corrupt gangsters or other kind of mercenary kind of characters, serial killers, things like that. And he just enacts kind of his own brand of vengeance and justice, and he's not afraid, like I said, to kind of get his hands dirty a little bit. He has a really strict moral code, even if it is a bit warped. I shouldn't say moral code. I should say he has a very kind of self-adherent set of values. A really fascinating character. It's kind of hard to put him in a box that a lot of other characters are in the Marvel Universe. He really does stand alone in many ways and feels a bit out of place with the rest of the universe, frankly. I honestly really enjoy his stories where he's really grounded and you feel like you're reading something that's coming out of real life New York, and it's a guy rising up to try to right wrongs in the ways he can. A great street level character. I think he works best street level, just trying to clean up the city from local criminals or organized crime or gangsters, like I mentioned earlier. Like I said, he will sometimes get caught up in bigger events, but he's not really an Avengers saving the world or kind of cosmic galactic kind of character, at least not this incarnation of Frank Castle. But yeah, I just think he's a great street character, and I think because he's willing to cross certain lines, it definitely makes him a bit of a standout compared to other characters in the Marvel Universe. Admittedly, I am still newer to Punisher, and again, I'm trying to avoid overly explicit comic books, but if you're a fan of Punisher and can recommend Punisher titles, I'm always willing to get a new recommendation. I'm hoping to read more of this character in the years to come, so frankly, I'd appreciate you reaching out and letting me know of some good ones. Next up, for great street-level Marvel characters, I have to talk about Luke Cage. Falsely imprisoned and subjected to crazy prison experiments, this superpowered hero has indestructible skin and does what he can to fight for justice in his communities. To showcase Luke Cage, I am looking at the Luke Cage Omnibus from Marvel Comics. This is a book that collects primarily 70s issues, so this is kind of the Bronze Age of comics. This is right at the origin of the hero Luke Cage here, and it's a really fascinating book. I was able to review this earlier, or actually later last year. A really interesting book. I took my time with this omnibus. It took me quite a bit to get through, but it was fascinating. I think for me, this character kind of escapes his wrongful imprisonment. Now he's empowered, unbreakable skin, and he basically tries to hire himself out to do good deeds. He's not quite a PI, but he finds himself embroiled in these people's personal lives or cases, and he'll get paid to kind of do heroic acts or to help people out who are in a jam. The idea is he has to make money somehow to earn a living, and so he's considered the hero for hire. That's actually what they named the series for a while. He does start to distance himself from that. He definitely has his own moral code, and he tries to really help people in need. And he often finds himself getting into deeper and deeper trouble or in the crosshairs of villainous people. They actually changed the title in this omnibus from Hero for Hire to Power Man. And so anyway, he kind of goes by Power Man at one point, but eventually this character, especially as he modernizes, he just goes by Luke Cage. He also teams up with Iron Fist at different points in his character's history, and honestly, he is a mainstay staple when I think of street-level Marvel heroes. So whether you pick up this omnibus or you try to find him in later incarnations, Luke Cage is definitely not a character to miss. I know that he actually had a live-action series as well on Netflix. I believe it's on Disney Plus right now if you follow the streamers, but a really fascinating character as well. You know, he's really tethered to New York, and like I said, he's trying to right wrongs and do the best he can in his communities. Because he has superpowers, having kind of nearly indestructible skin, and he's just a really strong man, he can kind of take on a bit more than just your standard just street criminals, but often I find his best stories are when he's doing just that, just trying to clean up his communities and doing what he can. There are times he crosses over with teams like the Avengers or the Thunderbolts, and he's definitely had a really distinctive and dynamic arc in the Marvel Universe. He even marries Jessica Jones, has a family, anyway, the whole nine. An absolutely terrific character. I was really happy to get to read this omnibus. This omnibus is a bit dated, you know, socially, and some of the issues they explore back in the 70s. It really is just an eye-opening and fascinating read, but from the moment one, this character is really compelling, interesting, and certainly sets himself apart amidst some of these other street-level heroes. Definitely don't miss out on Luke Cage. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Immortal Iron Fist, Danny Rand. And to do so, we're going to be looking at the Immortal Iron Fist Omnibus from Ed Brubaker, Matt Fraction, David Aja, and more. This is a really fun book that I actually picked up at the beginning of this year. This was reprinted last year, adding the kind of Immortal Weapons issues and things. So this is an expanded omnibus, but kind of a reprint. Anyway, this was a run I always wanted to read because I knew so very little about Iron Fist other than what I'd seen in crossovers or in his own streaming series, but I wanted to learn more about this character, and I'm a big fan of both Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, and I know that this is considered kind of the definitive run for this character. So I picked it up early this year, and I've been making my way through it, and I have loved the ride. Iron Fist is a really fascinating character as well. He is super powered. Basically, when he was young, he found himself in this kind of spiritual city that just happened to cross into our plane of existence. He was kind of trained up by monks and ultimately dipped his hands in kind of the heart of this dragon, and he can kind of focus his energies into his fists and have these glowing, super-powered fists, in addition to being just an extremely proficient martial artist. A really fascinating character, and I think when you kind of explore some of that heavy martial arts kind of mystical background, it's frankly more amusing and interesting to me that he finds himself as basically a street-level Marvel hero in New York. Yes, his travels sometimes take him beyond that, but it's really fun to see this street-level character who is empowered in this way. I mentioned it earlier, but he often teams up with Luke Cage. He's like his best friend. They had a long-running series together, but this is a really fun character. He's also, in many incarnations, kind of a billionaire. He kind of is a legacy in this kind of industrialist background with his family, who has its own corporation or what have you. But it is a really interesting blend of kind of the East and the West culturally in this book. Danny Rand himself feels like an interesting character, and this run has been amazing so far. I've also been dabbling in the Danny Rand early years kind of Iron Fist omnibus they released just recently, actually. But a really great street-level hero as well. I love that costume with the yellow and green. It is super striking, and to have a character that's so deeply entrenched in martial arts, I think when you're reading some of the action sequences, it just is a real standout. There's a stylization to a lot of the action scenes this character's in, and I just think it's a lot of fun as he kind of goes head-to-head with these street-level gangsters, or sometimes like the Hand, like the ninjas, things like that. Just a really, really fun character, and a little bit something different for you for all the street-level Marvel hero fans. And hey, if you're watching this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I'd just like to encourage you to do so. I'm always doing list videos like this, comic book reviews, hauls, and more. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's keep going with this list. Okay, moving right along, my next entry for great must-read Marvel street-level characters, we're going to be talking about Marc Spector Moon Knight. And to do so, I'm going to be looking at the Marc Spector Moon Knight Omnibus Volume 1. This is primarily written by Chuck Dixon, amongst some others. And this is another book that I actually got fairly recently. I'm still making my way through it, admittedly, but I'm really falling deeper in love with this character. I've recently read and reviewed the Jeff Lemire run and the early Jed MacKay stuff for Moon Knight. And this is just a really interesting character. In many incarnations, he has kind of the dissociative identity disorder, or the multiple personality disorder. He is a mercenary, he's sometimes a cabbie, he's sometimes a movie star or a millionaire. But no matter what you get, he is a character who is empowered by this kind of Egyptian guy. And he's meant to kind of look after the travelers in the night, and so he does a lot of street kind of justice. This is another character not too dissimilar from someone like Punisher, who will cross the line at some point in many of his incarnations. Marc Spector himself is a mercenary, and everything he does as Moon Knight is even an elevation of that. A really brutal and intense character, but another character that you get a lot of variety based on where you're reading. A lot of the modern incarnations go heavily into the psychology of Moon Knight, the different personalities, things like that. A run like this in this omnibus is much more straight-laced. He's primarily Marc Spector, and he dons his costume of Moon Knight, trying to clean up the streets and kind of take out different gangsters and other mercenaries. A really fascinating character. He also has a Disney Plus series, but this is a really fun one. I really enjoyed reading more from this character recently. I still have a lot of gaps in my knowledge of Moon Knight, but so far a very interesting street-level Marvel character that I think is definitely getting more and more popular as the years go on. This omnibus will be getting a volume 2 shortly, at the time of this recording anyway. I believe it comes out in the next month or so. But this one has been an absolute blast to make my way through. I've really enjoyed it. I love seeing some of the crossovers we get in this. I mentioned it earlier, but I read a great crossover where he teams up with the Punisher. They had him kind of teaming up with Baron Voodoo, and I'm only a little bit into this omnibus so far. There's been so many great runs with this character, but I think if any of the stuff I've said is striking you, it is definitely a fascinating character. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of superpowers or anything like that. He's really proficient in combat. He's pretty durable. He can sometimes heal. There's some incarnations that have maybe more empowering than others for this character, but definitely something that really sets itself apart. I think, especially with the popularity recently, and because he's just been on my mind reading more and more lately, this is definitely a street-level Marvel character that I think would fascinate many out there. Especially if you're looking for something a little bit more off the beaten path, Moon Knight might just be the hero for you. And last, but certainly not least, on my must-read Marvel street-level heroes, I have to talk about my favorite, my main man, Daredevil. To do that, today I'm going to go ahead and start looking at the Frank Miller and Klaus Janson Daredevil Omnibus. This was also reprinted last year. I was so happy to finally pick up a copy for my collection. Before that, I had the 3 volumes of the paperback run that comprised this run here. This is the really transformative run that happened, I think, late 70s, early 80s. But this really redefined this character. It introduced so many elements, retconning the origin, adding Stick and kind of the ninjas. We have a ton of stuff with Elektra, who's introduced in these pages. We have kind of an elevation of characters like Bullseye or Kingpin to kind of arch-villain status for Daredevil. And really, we just get so much more lore built into the character that every modern incarnation of Daredevil is really based on kind of the backbone of Frank Miller and Klaus Janson and what they did with this book. But this character, he was blinded after being hit in the eyes with some kind of radioactive waste, saving someone crossing the street. He is blinded, but is given a kind of sonar radar sense. He has his body tuned and honed to the utmost. He was trained in kind of ninjutsu kind of stuff by this guy named Stick, and he basically fights crime. His civilian identity, Matt Murdock, is a lawyer in New York City, and so we have him battling for justice on both sides of his coin, both in court and then also on the city streets. This is another character that will ultimately get pulled into Avengers or kind of world-saving missions here and there, but Ultimately, I really see this character as a street level vigilante, and I think his stories work best when he's tackling street level issues, like so many others on this list. I think the added wrinkle with Daredevil that I like is whenever we're dealing with all the ninjas. He often battles the Hand, which are kind of these, in some ways, undead ninjas. They're a really dark and malevolent force in the Marvel Universe, and I think all of the interactions he has with them, beginning with this time in Frank Miller, is just really fun. I think Daredevil, genre-wise as well, will blend sometimes with noir, which is another really fascinating genre I absolutely love. Daredevil is also really distinct in my mind because he has maybe the best batting average for comic book writers and comic book runs. I think in his history, once you get to Frank Miller and beyond, almost everything has been pretty stellar. I think especially once you get to the Marvel Knights era, beginning around when Kevin Smith jumped on the book, almost everything from there to the modern day I think has been a real blast. I'm not really a fan of the Shadowland era though, I have to admit, but even that has some winning moments. But beyond that, this is just a really great character, and almost no matter where you start, if you grab a volume 1, you're almost guaranteed for a pretty solid ride. This is not only my favorite Marvel superhero, my favorite superhero character in general, but honestly, my best example for a great street level comic book hero. And that's really going to round out this list of 5 must-read street-level Marvel Comics heroes. This was just a quicker list. I decided to go for kind of a top 5 today instead of the usual top 10, although there are so many more characters that could have made this list. Characters like Jessica Jones, Hawkeye, Spider-Woman. Honestly, the list can go on and on. In fact, if your favorite Marvel street-level characters didn't make this list, throw them out in the comments. I'd love to hear more of favorite Marvel street level characters, or if your favorites did make this list, maybe recommend your favorite comic book runs for street level heroes, maybe your favorite story arcs. I would love just great recommendations for those that want to get into more of the street level Marvel storytelling, not your Avengers world saving missions or your Marvel cosmic stuff, just the kind of the straight, grounded, most of the time New York City based crime fighters. Would love a great list of recommendations down below for me and anyone else who might stumble across this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm still having such fun making these videos for all of you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, maybe leave that comment, and check out another video on your way out. Thank you so much, and have a good one.